Hi everyone, welcome back to PACU Nursing Minutes. This week we are going to enjoy a little tea with Amy Parker, learning about taking evidence into action. I'm Nurse Kathy with PACU Nursing Minutes, and today I have a special guest, Amy Parker, and she is here to share with us a concept that she developed, and it's called taking evidence into action, applying evidence-based practices within the nursing practice. So Amy, thank you for coming on to PACU Nursing Minutes and just giving up your time to share with us how we can take evidence into action.
Thank you.
So I just want to share with all the viewers, we both have no disclosures. So Amy, tell me, how did you come up with this idea of taking evidence into action?
So in about 2010, I was a research chair at a hospital in the Seattle area. And it's kind of evidence-based practice was kind of young back then. And I was thinking about how the council could creatively introduce evidence-based practice to the bedside healthcare provider. And then I kind of, as I looked into this, they had a conflict about, hey, this is the way I've always done it versus, the new ways might not be the best. And then I kind of looked back a little bit more and discovered that even Florence Nightingale created her own statistics, and she did evidence-based practice in the 1800s. So it's an old concept kind of brought forward. And so kind of went to bed that night, kind of thinking, and about 4 a.m, I just had this concept of, hey, the English take tea, and I had prayed about it, and it was like this concept dropped in my heart. It's like, oh, taking tea is like doing evidence-based practice. So like the teacup represents who we are. Like if you see this teacup on a table, it's my tea, it's my service, it's my teacup to you. Mm-hmm. And then the hot water inside the teacup would represent our practice, and the tea bag represents evidence. And when we put the tea bag into the hot water, a change takes place. And that steam and that aroma coming up is what our patient experiences. It's kind of like tea brings healing. Well, so does nursing practice, or practices from other multidisciplinary staff too. So I want to include them because we all do it. So yeah, that's how it kind of came to be.
That is a great concept, because as I've thought about it, we met a couple weeks ago, and it does, every nurse is individual and they all have their special talent that they bring to the bedside. Mm-hmm. And as they grow in their nursing practice, they go from novice to expert. And so that's kind of like that hot water heating up as they grow in their practice. And then when you take the research and you put it into that nurse's clinical experience, it does change their practice, just like those tea leaves change that hot water. And I mean, who doesn't love a good cup of tea? And who doesn't love an awesome, experienced nurse who's practicing evidence-based practice in her practice and sharing that with her peers? So yeah, I think it's a great way to rethink and re-energize about evidence-based practice, and just coming back and saying, I know we're in this busy world, and there's a huge turnover, especially in perianesthesia nursing, but that kind of, well, I'm jumping ahead a couple of questions, but so maybe can you tell me a little bit, who was maybe your cheerleader for your nursing to guide you into evidence-based practice from a nursing research standpoint? Who got you most ignited about this?
Well, I was a real novice about evidence-based practice in 2010, and I had been a nurse since 1990. And at 2010, I felt like a novice about evidence-based practice. And my surgery director, Judith Canfield, came up to me and said, what's the evidence of what nurses should do for sleep apnea patients. And I'm like, what does the court of law have to do about this? Like what? I was like completely like caught off guard.
Yeah.
And I came to realize, I think evidence-based practice was only about maybe 3 to 6 years old. So it really wasn't too bad that I didn't know much about it, but it just showed that I was kind of hidden under a rock maybe. So, and then it's kind of like, this is where experts meeting competent nursing are so important. Like when you talk about novice to expert theory, you've got Patricia Benner, who came up with it. She's at UCSF and she's a fantastic lecturer. And then, so my expert, Judy Canfield, along with Liz Torrance, were amazing leaders for me, helped me develop my practice. And when I went back to school, I even drew from their coaching of evidence-based practice. It made my evidence research class really easy because I had done it in real life. And so it made sense. And I think the problem that we have is we have computer classes, and not a lot of interaction with clinical nurse specialists much anymore. And
Right.
that expert infusing into the novice,
Yeah.
that this is where, we need somebody to say, hey, you want this kind of tea, you don't want that kind of tea, and do we really think that this kind of tea is going to work? Is it really applicable to a broad swath of practice? I can tell you, a Bigelow tea bag, it's relevant. Everybody knows Bigelow tea. That when you buy it, you're not going to get a bad tea, right? If I took you to a tea specialty store, there's some teas that are kind of outliers, and that's what probably can make a big difference when you're selecting what happens in what you choose as a practice model to put into your own practice. So there you go.
You're absolutely right, because the evidence, changes outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, what level of evidence are you putting into your teacup, or quality of tea or tea leaf? What quality of care are you giving?
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for sharing that. So for novice nurses, where should they start in getting into research?
Well, they're really at the basic, and a lot of them coming into perianesthesia nursing have already been ICU nurses,
Mm-hmm.
or they've been emergency room nurses.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're kind of coming into this perianesthesia practice. Well, there's some concepts with anesthesia that aren't in intensive care nursing or in emergency nursing. So I highly recommend that they join the professional organization. Even watching videos like what you offer on your channel are really, really helpful, because there's those little tiny nuances that you need to kind of embrace. So the professional organization that I belong to is ASPAN, and they give a journal every month. So this is a copy that you get in the mail for free. Kind of like a shameless plug for ASPAN, I know. But a lot of people that I've met in this organization, it's like the expert meeting the novice. And I think a lot of my practice in perianesthesia nursing has been really enhanced by those experts. And so joining a professional organization, looking at the articles in the journal. Now, even with that, some of us in ASPAN, I'm down in Texas now, our TAPAN organization, we have a little journal club that meets Zoom online. And hey, even if you're out of Texas, you could still join us. We'd love to have you. But we'll critique some of these articles in here, and we'll be like, and so we use the ASPAN critique chart to look at the article and say, hey, is this a good article to use? Is this going to change my practice? And here's one in here: compassion, fatigue, and burnout, one institution's interventions. So we have a lot of burnout going on from COVID, or I'm sorry, compassion fatigue. Well, that too. And how is this article going to affect my practice? And even different anesthesias coming out, knowing the nuances. I know, you could listen to a drug presentation at an ASPAN meeting when they talk about, like Sugamadex, you need to make sure that that patient has to use an alternative form of birth control for like a couple of days or so after having that drug on board. Well, a lot of nurses don't know this. So how are you going to know? These are these tiny little nuances. What's the plasma concentration of all of the narcotics that you give? What's a good exit time for your patient to leave the recovery room to go to phase 2? I mean, these are really kind of interesting little nuances that come from immersing yourself in a professional organization and having conversations with experts,
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I definitely highly recommend all nurses that are in perianesthesia to join ASPAN and to get to know the resources that they have out there. It will change their practice.
Mhm.
And they have tons of education on their website as well. So,
Yeah.
so how would you recommend for nurses to begin taking the T, the take evidence into action concept, and how would you recommend them to begin them applying that to their practice?
Well, if you do a little journal club along with an article, like maybe lay out an article, highlight it, and just kind of lay it out there on the desk and see if anybody reads it. Just kind of get a feel for your unit's personality. I think sometimes we can have a culture that can be a bit passive about evidence-based practice. So making it fun is a good way. I know when I was in Seattle, we did a 2 o'clock to 4 in the afternoon tea time. So that kind of encompasses day shift and evening shift. And we would have these little baggies that had a teacup that was styrofoam, and it had a little sticker on it that had the emblem of our nursing model. And then inside that teacup, we had a tea bag with a little tiny label, sticker on the label that said evidence. And the teapot said practice. And and I said, as I poured the water, I'm like going, you have to remember this water is hot. You got to keep your practice receptive to change, and it's not going to stay the same. And also we have to make sure that our tea bags were fresh. I mean, if I had an old evidence sitting around here, like you drink that tea and you're like, yuck, The other way to make this fun is I had a few colleagues that are from India, so they love chai, right? So instead of using Bigelow chai, or I'm sorry, Bigelow tea, we would get chai. Or my friend from Nepal, this is her jasmine tea. And so you can make this culturally diverse. Now, we know that we're all into diversity now and honoring each person. And I mean, the other thing too is everybody's got their own little teacup, and you're like, oh, I know that's Nurse Dan's teacup, or I know that's Judy's teacup over there. And you see like this little analogy going on, right? Now, the fun part goes with cath lab people, because sometimes I don't know if real technical folk really get analytical stuff. They're like, tea, like what am I supposed to drink? They just, sometimes I'd have to kind of make sure that the analogy was absorbed in their understanding. It's kind of fun. I love cath lab people. I used to work with them all the time in Seattle, but anyway, side note. But just kind of making this fun. And along with this tea package, you have an article sitting next to the tea packet. So let's say, hey, look, this article is helpful for us. It is something that all of us as a team can focus on this week. And I mean, I know as people study for certification, you can put a certification question on a board from APNC. It's the American Board of Perianesthesia Nurse Certification. They have questions every week that come out, and you can put that on there, and you can find a research article that goes with that question. And that kind of goes to you kind of being a bit more of a evidence-based practice tea service person, like, I got to know how to go to the research libraries, like CINAHL or the other, like Joanna Briggs Institute, and say, We refer to Joanna Briggs as JBI, going to their websites and saying, here's how I can find an article that goes with a current issue happening to us as nurses, you know. And I think one of the search questions that I want to find out is like, I'm noticing a lot of people are retaining carbon dioxide these days. You know, the upswing of sleep apnea or obstructive sleep apnea is big.
Yeah.
So what do I need to do as a nurse to make sure they have a safe discharge? There's tons of articles about that on those libraries. Didn't used to be. Back in 2011, there wasn't any. When my director asked me for evidence, couldn't find it. But now Mayo's done a lot of research and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, there's
long answer.
well, you know, just that topic of CO2 retention and our sleep apnea patients and their recovery times. There is tons of data out there now on end-tidal CO2 monitoring and OSA screening and interventions and what is best for those patients pre and post-op. So you're right. The level of evidence that is available to soak in is profound. And so I just love your concept. I hope that as the nurses out there watch this on PACU Nursing Minutes, I hope that inspires them to, you know, start a tea club in their PACU and their pre-op, and help them start to steep that into their practice and change their practice. Yeah, thank you for coming on to PACU Nursing Minutes and raising the awareness of how we can begin to move forward into taking this wealth of wonderful evidence out there and starting to soak it in and to change our practice. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
So if you'd like to learn more about Amy's taking evidence into action, I will have some links in the show notes below and also some references about evidence-based practice in nursing. Thank you as always for tuning in to PACU Nursing Minutes. I am Nurse Kathy and I have Nurse Amy with me. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.